Now that you're familiar with how float works, it's time to take our positioning skills to the next level with CSS position property. Up until now, we've mostly been talking about how elements flow within their container, and we have seen that they stack on top of each other or sit next to each other. Sometimes you may want even more control over where elements are placed on the page, and that's where the position property comes in. With the position, you can control exact placement of an element, whether it's in relation to its normal position or parent container. There are several values we can use with the position property, but today we're going to focus on 5 most common ones. These are static, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. As you can see, on my screen I have different boxes that I'm going to use to demonstrate the position property. Let me walk you through how they are created. So these boxes are created using divs. So if we start from line 10, I have a div with a class of container. Inside that div, I have 3 other divs. And then outside, I have 2 other divs. And if you noticed, all the divs have 2 class names, but they share this class name of box. So this is how we use multiple classes in an element. You have a class name, space, another class name. So let me show you my styles. Inside the body, I have a font family and it is looking for Georgia. If Georgia is not there, Times New Romans. If it's not there, Times. If Times is not there, any serif font in your computer. I've reset the margin to 0, padding to 0, a background color of #F0, F0, F0, then a height of 1500 px so we can scroll the body. Inside the container class, I have a width of 100%, height of 500 px, background color of #3498db, margin bottom 20 px, and the class of box has a width of 150 px, height of 100 px. Then the text inside this box will have a color of white, font size 16 px, text align center, line height 100 px, and a margin of 10 px. Then all the boxes have different background color, as you can see. So let's start with static. With static, you need to know that every element in CSS has a position static by default. So this means that the element is placed in the normal flow of the document and it behaves just like other elements around it, stacked top to bottom. Also, when an element is static, we cannot use the offsets like top, bottom, left, and right. Our static box has a static position by default, so let's move on to relative. When you set the position with the value of relative, it means that the element is positioned relative to its original normal position in the document flow. So you are shifting it from where it would normally be. So let's switch to our code and add position relative to the relative box. Alright, so save that and switch to the browser and reload. And it seems like nothing happened. So let's go back to our code and add top 20px, left 20px to our relative box. Command S to save and back to the browser. And before I reload, I want you to watch the relative box. Okay, so reload. As you can see, the relative box has moved down 20 pixels and right 20 pixels from where it would normally be, which is somewhere here. So you can see the element moves visually, but it doesn't affect the position of the other elements and it still reserves the same space in the layout. Next up is absolute. When you set an element to a position with the value of absolute, it's completely removed from the document flow. This means it doesn't affect the layout of the other element anymore, and you can position it exactly where you want on the page. Let's switch to our code and add position absolute to the absolute box. Save and switch to the browser. There was a slightly move. So let's go back and add a top of 50 and a left of 30 px. Save that and switch to the browser and focus on the absolute box again. Reload. So what has happened is that the box has moved 50 pixels from the top and 30 pixels from the left of its nearest position ancestor. For our case, we haven't set position on the blue container. So the box is placed relative to the initial containing block, which is HTML or the body element. If you have any question, please write them in the comment below. Okay, so let's move on. To correct that, we need to go to our container and add position relative. Save that and go to the browser, reload. Now the absolute box has the nearest position ancestor, which is our blue container. Also, you can see we have some overlapping of our elements here. And if you want to control which element should be at the back or which one should come on the front, we use another property called z-index. So an element with the higher z-index will be at the front, and one with the lower z-index will be pushed to the back. So if you think of x-axis and y-axis coordinates, this will be our z-axis. Let's say you want to push your absolute box to the back. We can write z-index of -1, save and switch to the browser. Absolute box has gone behind all the boxes. To correct that, let's go to the container and add a z-index of -5. Save that, switch to the browser and reload. And there is our absolute box behind all the boxes. Now let's talk about fixed. Elements with position fixed are positioned relative to the viewport, which is the visible area of the web page. So let's switch to the code and add position with the value of fixed to our fixed box. Save that and switch to the browser. So before I reload, pay attention where this fixed box is and reload. As you can see, even when I scroll the page, the fixed box stays fixed. So let's go back and add a top of 0 and a right of 0. Save that, switch to the browser, reload. No matter how far I scroll down, this fixed box will stay on this corner. This is perfect for things like sticky navigation bars or floating action buttons. Finally, we have the sticky. The sticky value is a combination of relative and fixed. So it will behave like a relative element until it reaches a certain scrolling position, which you will set on the offsets, and then it will behave like a fixed element. So let's add the position sticky to our sticky box. Save that and switch to the browser and reload. So let's go back and add a top with the value of 0. So save that, switch to the browser and reload. As you can see, the sticky box scrolls with the page until it reaches the top of the viewport. Then it stays in place as you continue scrolling. The sticky positioning is a great way to create sticky navigation menus, table headers, or any element you want to keep visible while the user scrolls through the content. So let's quickly summarize the 5 main values of the position property. Static is a default value and elements are placed in the normal flow. Then relative, elements are positioned relative to their normal position. Absolute, elements are removed from the normal flow and positioned relative to their nearest positioned ancestor. Fixed, elements are fixed in place relative to the viewport and they don't move when you scroll. Sticky, elements are positioned like relative until they reach a specified scroll position, then they stick like fixed. And there you have it. And now you know the CSS position property. Play around with these different values and see how they affect your layout. And when you feel comfortable to continue, meet me in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.